Hello and welcome to episode 22 of the Influential Times. As always, I'm joined by Jack.
Hi everyone. I don't know about you, but it's episode 22.
For my first story this week, shock, I'm going to be talking about Clubhouse, because I know our listeners would be gutted if we didn't give a monthly Clubhouse update. To mine and Jack's delight, Clubhouse opened up to Android users in May. Which I don't know about you, Jack, but it kind of feels like they've missed the boat a little bit, because it seems like a lot of Android users jumped to Twitter Spaces in the interim, and they maybe have lost a little bit of momentum there.
Yeah, I guess they're slightly victims of their own success, weren't they? That the initial sort of growth was so meteoric that they're maybe going to struggle to recover that, even though they've actually got a pretty respectable number of users. I guess we don't have visibility over the monthly active users number, so that's probably the information I'd be guarding quite closely if I were them for now, in case it's not looking too pretty. But
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's like one of those where they've been so successful that all the other bigger platforms have jumped on it, and perhaps they're now fighting to keep up with those bigger platforms. But my story isn't actually about that. It's about the fact they've announced Creator First, which is actually a pilot of essentially a creator-led audio show. They announced this last week, and they've effectively picked out a kind of cohort of 50 finalists, who they're basically going to give a lot of technical, financial, and promotional support to kind of pilot a season of these shows. So effectively, how it's going to work is each creator will get $5,000 and supposedly all the tech support they need to essentially put on a show. And the topics and genres are quite broad. So you've got everything from interactive game shows, cultural and historical discussions. There's hair and beauty. Apparently that was one of the more popular categories. And there's even
that in audio.
Yeah.
Audio is.
It's interesting. And then even a psychic ability development show. So any of those tickle your fancy, Jack?
All of them. Sign me up for every single one of them.
Hair and beauty, I imagine, would be up there.
I mean, absolutely, of course. Do you even need to ask? I suppose it's interesting. There's kind of two sides to that, isn't there? That, in one sense, great that the money is immediately going to creators. I think you get what you pay for in terms of content quality, and if you put a bit of money behind it, I think creators will surprise you if they have the sort of time and space and the tools to produce something really exciting. I think they will. I suppose the interesting thing is that they're also by default admitting they're a publisher. They're a sort of, lots of social platforms really struggle with that question, like, are we responsible for what's on our platform? Because we're not the publisher, we're just the host. But if you pay for it, if you're paying that person, then surely you're going to be responsible. If someone in the psychic ability development conversation is saying something really unacceptable, it's going to be pretty hard to act like it's nothing to do with you and you're just the conduit. So bit of a double-edged sword for them potentially.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one, an interesting, I guess, diversification, perhaps due to, like we said, the number of players getting involved. I think looking at it, probably the only platform that's going to really rival them in this area is probably Spotify. I know on the last update I was talking around the Spotify's sort of route into the live audio. I think they're going a bit more down this route as well, a bit more around sort of shows, and obviously one of their big objectives is to help their big sort of database, I guess, of creators and musicians and people like that to connect better with their audience. So I think definitely shows will be the route that they go down, and perhaps Spotify will be the one to watch out for in this area. So yeah, some interesting updates there. I think, Jack, you've got some Twitter updates on their subscription announcement.
Yes, Twitter watchers, other people who are sort of watching closely. I wrote an article for the Analytica blog recently about Twitter, and I sort of think they're quietly having a pretty good last 6 months to a year. So the sort of subscription service has basically been listed in the App Store. It's not really live yet. Someone has signed up. There's a lady who always ends up signing up first. to these things, and is usually the one. It's Jane Manchun Wong, who's kind of always the first one onto this kind of thing, but she spotted it. It's part of an interesting little suite. You know, I think at the beginning, people were when they sort of announced the subscription service, there was a lot of skepticism, but I think as it's starting to take shape rather, what that could actually include, I think there's potentially quite an interesting service there where you're sort of paying maybe to sort of have the edit button for 30 seconds after you send a tweet. Maybe you're paying, they bought Scroll, which is a service which helps you read content ad-free on sites that sort of partner with Scroll. So you can see how if you're sort of quite a heavy user of Twitter, there's maybe an interesting little package if you're sort of paying a small amount to have, you know, paywall-free, ad-free access to a lot of your favorite publications. You know, I could kind of see, I could see that being worthwhile. You know, Twitter's sort of famously addictive for the people who are into it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on it. I don't know, have any of the features that they're sort of announcing particularly caught your eye? Is there one that you could see yourself popping in your £2.49 for?
Yeah, not really. I mean, I've probably got more, I guess, concerns with some of them than ones that are jumping out at me. I think the edit button has always been a bit of a contentious issue, hasn't it? Because people always say, "Oh, I wish I could edit a tweet," but actually, when you start thinking about the implications of it, it could get a bit messy. I know there's a lot of issues on Facebook where people post in a group a certain opinion on something, and then obviously people comment saying, "Oh, this is amazing," and then you can edit it to say pretty much whatever you want. And then how does that look for the people who've commented? So I've always been a bit skeptical about the kind of edit button. So
from what I've heard about the edit button, it's likely, I think they were sort of saying it's going to be a bit more like a lot of messaging apps. But Facebook's Messenger, for example, gives you a little window to undo after sending in case you send to the wrong person.
Yeah, so
I think it could be a little bit more
editing.
like that.
Yeah,
you got like 30 seconds to look at it, and if you spot the typo, then you've sort of got a window.
A bit like the 1 minute delay on my emails, which frustrates me every day.
Yeah, even if you're probably the moment you need it though, you're glad.
Oh yeah, yeah. Every now and then it comes in handy. Yeah,
absolutely saves you. So you had one more story that you were going to share.
Yeah, mine's Twitter as well. The news that came out around verification. So, you know, everyone obviously is constantly talking about, you know, getting a blue tick, and how you can do that. I was actually quite interested that there's 360,000 verified accounts. I thought in my head there'd be quite a few more than that, and it's always worked in the way that Twitter would almost approach the individuals who have a certain size following, and they try and verify them sort of proactively, because I guess some people probably aren't as bothered, but it's really important. And they've essentially opened that up now to the public. So essentially anyone can verify their account. You can go into settings, and there's kind of a verification sort of section now. And yeah, essentially they've set up a few categories. So you can say, I'm an influencer, I'm a company, I'm an entertainment group, I'm a government official, for example. And then each category has a slightly different process. So for example, if you say that you're an influencer, you have to kind of provide proof, which could be in the form of like a news article where you've been mentioned. Obviously, if you're a journalist, then it might be something you've written yourself. Effectively, they're stopping anyone from faking it and saying that they're an influencer or a journalist when they're not. So I guess it's to be seen how effective this will be. One interesting thing as well is that you'd probably expect it to be something like automated to some degree. Twitter have actually said they've opened up a new team who are dealing with these requests. So partly maybe that they want to make sure people don't slip through the net, but it might just take a little bit more time for those verifications to happen than perhaps in an automated way. So yeah, that's an interesting one. Have you applied for your blue tick yet, Jack?
I haven't. I don't know. I'd have to go through all of the categories and figure out which one of them would maybe be the appropriate one. I suppose. I mean, it continues. It validates my pre-existing opinion that Twitter are they're the ones making a lot of the smart moves and the moves that I feel just make sense at the minute. Like that point you made about accepting that sometimes you need a human to verify something, to just eyeball the information. I think it's true. I know, having tried to sometimes design an algorithm or a set of rules or a set of logic that you think is really airtight, that it doesn't always work the way you expect it to. And sometimes you just need human judgment. You need someone who you can come and ask, why did you do that? And to have that person sort of list the reason. So I think that's maybe one of the most sort of telling dynamics of this is the acceptance that actually they're, to make sure that the verification has some genuine weight. It's not sort of seen as something that's just thrown around.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of refreshing.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it'd be interesting to see how that number of verified accounts kind of creeps up over time. And I think your final story, Jack, is around Instagram and their recent experiment with hiding like counts.
Yeah, so it turns out I read the article and I was surprised to see it's been quite as long, because when we were discussing this earlier, we were saying, it seems like that's been going on for a really long time, and it's been 2 years that they've actually been testing this. They've been talking about, so a really long time. The sort of outcome really of this is, they've tried giving people the option. Well, they've tried just hiding it by default, and they sort of found actually that was not effective at meaningful. It didn't sort of have a big enough impact on sort of changing the dynamic. So they're going to give people the option to hide it if they would like. That said, it's going to default, the default settings of the app will kind of have it enabled as standard, and there'll be something you can go into the settings and take off. I think it maybe follows on from the theme with Twitter that it can be tricky to create a rule that really works for everyone. And I think, there's a lot of questions when it comes to social media, because it's become so ubiquitous in society, and it's so woven into kind of how information gets distributed and things, that some of this is really tough, and it mixes a lot with the way that the rest of the world operates, and it can be quite tricky. But yeah, I think that it sounds like they've come to the right decision, that you let the individual decide. I think as far as marketers are concerned, it could be a slightly irritating future. I could see creators maybe hiding it deliberately to keep that information almost behind a wall. Maybe they'd want it public so that people can see how many likes they get. But I think that could be an interesting dynamic in our part of the world, in the sort of for marketers, is trying to deal with, what do you do when likes are or aren't visible?
Yeah.
So I think that could be tricky. Are you going to be hiding likes on the Insta, or are you not that fussed about it?
I'm not too bothered, to be honest, personally. Like, I see it as more of a kind of scrapbook of memories and things like that. But I think, it's interesting to see how companies deal with it. I think certainly conversations I'm having with people, I think some of the kind of marketing directors now are looking less at the numbers and more at who's engaging. That's what they want to know about more. So who's sharing it, who's maybe commenting, is probably a bit more valuable now. But I know that sometimes at the exec level, they just want to see the numbers. So I guess it might be an interesting shift of how we measure like reach and engagement online, and what people will have access to and won't have access to. It might shift that a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a tricky one to work out, and I think, we'll have to decide. I feel the same way as you, that Instagram is kind of like a loose scrapbook.
Yeah.
To occasionally just put any odd thing, but neither of us have a large following, and I don't know. I've never had that experience, so I think worth considering it. Adam Mosseri said he got sort of very strong opinions on both sides. Some people going like, think of the children, you're kind of ruining their lives. They're growing up in this pressurized world. Oxford University completed a 30-year study that suggested maybe smartphones and social media have a little impact, but it's not actually that big.
Yeah.
A lot of it is sort of wider societal changes. So combined with the frankly horrible experience of being a teenager. So jury's still out, I think, but to me feels like Instagram have come to a sort of sensible decision, although a very big one to spend 2 years on.
Yeah, Absolutely, quite a long window. Well, that's everything from this episode. I hope everyone enjoys the content. As always, there will be a bonus story, so do read the newsletter. And yeah, we will see you next month.
Cheers, everyone.